I'm Julia Winter with Alchemie, and I'm here with Andy Brunning of Compound Interest. Actually, I'm going to stop right there. Andy, compound interest, compound chemistry, we get confused. So give me a little backstory before we go forward. Which one are you, or are you both? And where did it come from?
It is compound interest, but the website is compoundchem.com because I think when I was setting it up, I figured if I made it compoundinterest.com, I'd just get loads of hits from people looking for the economic form of compound interest. As it turns out, I still get routinely on Facebook a message every month or so about how to calculate compound interest, and I have to very politely point out that they're probably on the wrong Facebook page.
So okay, good. Well, that answers that question. That was like the top of my marketing team's question. Could you ask about that piece? So I have to go back. I was a 20-year school teacher teaching chemistry. I know that's your background. So I would love to hear the origin story. And just actually, for those who aren't familiar, give us your 30-second, what do you do that's special about compound interest? We know because we love your website, but why don't you tell it to us and then tell us how it started?
Sure. So Compound Interest is a website on which I make a variety of different posters, infographics, whatever you like to call them, where I discuss various different facets of everyday chemistry. So highlighting the chemistry of different foods and different chemical compounds that cause certain effects, or looking at kind of current news stories and the chemistry behind those, or even just current events and things like that. So it covers a whole host of topics. For the moment, for example, there are a load of graphics on the site about the International Year of the Periodic Table. So I'm doing a graphic for every single element in the periodic table along with the Royal Society of Chemistry. And I've been doing it for about 5 years now, a little over 5 years actually. In fact, I think it's coming up to 6 years in December. I originally started Compound Interest whilst I was teaching. So I was a teacher in the UK for 5 years, and I taught students, for those who aren't aware of what age secondary school is in the UK, it's students from the ages of 11 all the way up to students aged 18. So quite a wide age range. And Compound Interest was a website that I started in part to kind of create contextual links to the chemistry that students were studying with, more kind of everyday things they encountered and helping them see those connections.
Did they like your stuff? I mean, chemistry students can be a little tough sometimes.
Yeah.
Were they as excited about the pieces that you were making as you were?
There was definitely some variability, I think. But yeah, no, they did at least do a good job of seeming interested when I had them up in the classroom. I eventually got to the point, whilst that was originally the genesis story of how Compound Interest began, eventually I obviously got to the point where I had way too many graphics on the site and not enough classroom space. So it wasn't as if I had the whole series of them up. And then it kind of grew a life of its own and became kind of like a second thing that I was doing alongside teaching.
What did your headmaster or the hires up at your school think about your side gig?
I was quite lucky actually in my first school that I was teaching in, because when I was in the starting Compound Interest, the school that I was in, the headmaster was actually a chemist as well. So he was quite interested in the whole thing. In fact, he still follows me on Twitter and retweets.
Yeah, I think it's retweets.
Cut that out. And he still follows me on Twitter and retweets the posts from the Compound Interest account. So I'm guessing, yeah, he approves.
Does he miss you though? You have left the classroom, correct?
I have, yeah. So I actually left that school a few years prior to leaving the classroom. So that was a school in Bournemouth I was teaching in, and then I taught for a few years at a school in Cambridge. And I have now, as you say, left teaching, but I'm still involved in chemistry education because I work for one of the exam boards that in the UK, basically. And it would probably take a lot of time to go into the detail of what exam boards are for people who don't know, and it's not necessarily the most thrilling conversation.
So when did you leave the classroom? I left in 2016 to follow my new path. I'm just, because we started about the same time I started my journey in 2013, sort of fell into it. Now I'm CEO of Alchemie and away we go. But I think we're almost similar, lockstep. Am I correct?
Yes, I've been out of the classroom for 2 years now.
Okay.
in my current job. And then I still carry on doing the compound interest stuff on the side of that.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's interesting. So here's my question, and this came up last week. So you came up with the Nobel Prize, the lithium-ion batteries within, I swear, seconds of the announcement. Did you have things like, were you betting? Like people were like thinking, who's gonna get it? Did you have things already ready, or were you had to come up from scratch
I
with
was quite lucky in the
program?
case in the case of the lithium ions one. I was quite lucky because do have graphics which I've done previously, which have focused on different aspects of lithium ion batteries. So I had one which I'd done for Chemical Engineering News a few years back, which was back when, if you remember, they had the exploding batteries
Oh yeah.
story in
Okay.
the news. So we did one on that. So I had some kind of general graphics for it, and I'd also done one looking at some research which was on kind of improvements that are being made to lithium ion batteries. So yeah, in that case, I was quite lucky. I was quite pleased when I saw that lithium ion batteries had won it. One, because it's a really nice kind of everyday application of chemistry, which people know about, people use on a daily basis. So in itself, that's great to see that being recognized. And also, of course, the fact that John Goodenough is very old, and it was starting to
Yeah.
look like he'd be one of those recipients who would unfortunately not live to get a Nobel Prize. But of
And
course,
that has happened.
the other reason I was
So,
pleased was because I had some material on it, which isn't usually the case. Because for the Nobel Prize ones, I kind of committed myself really to doing graphics on the individual Nobel Prizes every year. And I try and commit myself to doing them on the day of the Nobel Prize being awarded as well, which in previous years has been, pretty, I wouldn't go as far as saying straightforward, but I've had the time, I've got home from work, sat down, gone, okay, what was the prize for this year? Let's look at all the background information. Let's put something together. And it really is just a, small, succinct summary of what the prize was awarded for, because the Nobel Prize Foundation Committee publish all sorts of background information. But this year, slightly more challenging with a 5-month-old baby, as it turns out. Because you have to take breaks from making the graphic when, although he's gone to bed, he's woken up and he needs to go back to sleep again. So that made it a bit more interesting. Just about managed.
oh, well, good for you. Are you stay-at-home dadding a lot?
No, I'm still back at work.
Oh,
Unfortunately, I'd love to be just hanging out with baby all day. But yeah, I still get to see him in the evenings when I'm back, which is nice. And yeah, the graphic work has taken a little bit more of a backseat, but yeah, I'm just basically staying up quite late.
I get that. From leaves falling to lithium-ion batteries to all the periodic tables. So is there like a list of to-dos that you have, or just tell me a little bit about your process?
Yeah, there is. So I've got a kind of to-do list app on my phone, which I've repurposed as the list of things that I could do a graphic on. And those come from a variety of places, really. So some of them come from people who've emailed in and said, "Oh, could you do a graphic on this? Could you do a graphic on that?" Sometimes those don't go
So
anywhere.
requests, you get requests.
Yeah, absolutely. So some come from that area. Some just from things which come up every day, like something will come up in conversation. I think that's probably quite a good idea for a graphic, and note it down. And then others still, come from online. People suggest things, news stories, things that come up, and then there's a relevant graphic for that. Or just things that are going on in my life, really. So lots of baby themed posts, kind of half in the works in some cases. There was one on pregnancy tests a while back. There was one on nappies in the works. I still haven't finished. One on Someone wanted me to do one on baby poo.
Ooh, ooh, please.
Yeah.
Actually, we had pushback on one of yours that we converted to an animation, and it was that compound is in poo. And we went, oh, please, really? So I will have to share that. And that comes to my next question. Do you ever get pushback, like on certain things that might be somewhat controversial? And if you do, how do you handle that?
Sometimes, yeah. So um back kind of quite near to when I started the site, actually, in the first couple of years, I did make some which were looking at slightly more controversial compounds in terms of ones which had a prior reputation as not necessarily being good. So, for example, monosodium glutamate and all the stories which surround that, aspartame and all the stories which surround that. And so I made some graphics looking at, what was the truth behind those stories, what was the evidence actually which suggested one way or the other. And I did get quite a bit of pushback on those, just generally from the internet, in the comments section. And as we all know, the comments section is a wonderful place where people only ever say nice things.
Yes, absolutely.
And then generally some of the others, I mean, most of the time people are fairly polite if they spot something that's an issue. Sometimes I do get things wrong in the graphics and try to very hastily correct them when I do. Other times people just disagree with the way that things are being presented. So there is cases where the essence of a graphic means that sometimes you have to pare things back to that simplest explanations, and sometimes people get a little bit unhappy about that and say, well, actually, there's this extra bit of detail and you have to explain well, yes, of course there is, but we can't fit all that detail into one tiny graphic. But overall, people are fairly positive about them, which is really good. And the response is overwhelmingly positive online when I share them, which is great.
As making interactives, chemists can be very picky, I'm just going to say in general. So we have to listen to everyone. Okay, you're right. Maybe we need to think about that for later. Now, here's another question. There's a lot of people who aren't chemists who follow you. Even my customer success specialist said her mother has sent her Facebook pictures from you, not knowing that we had anything to do with you. So has there been any surprises, say from the non-chemistry folk who want certain things or like certain things? Like what is a favorite among them?
I think probably one of the big favorites are things that focus on kind of colorful chemistry. So amongst the most popular ones on the site are things looking at the chemistry of the color of fireworks, which obviously has a kind of seasonal aspect as well when people are interested in finding out about it. The autumn leaves graphic looking at the different colors of autumn leaves and how they cycle around, again, pretty popular year on year. So these kind of like overarching big phenomena that everybody experiences, I guess, it is something that people find unexpected connection with chemistry that they hadn't necessarily thought about before, but that appeals to them and actually they do find quite interesting.
Yeah, actually, I will say that I am married to an inorganic chemist, and watching fireworks every year is a very different experience when we talk about, oh, that one's magnesium and that one's copper. And it's like, okay, we've heard this story before, but it is every single year we go through and it's fun. I mean, it really is fun. So here's another question. I'll just go back with what we've been doing. So we've had so much fun. And I think it was about a year ago, this month, we decided to take your autumn leaves and animate it. We really didn't ask permission. We asked forgiveness after we built it, but we did ask before we posted it. Your feelings on our art, because we love trolling through your resources to come up with new ideas. Any favorites on that?
I think the autumn leaves one was a big favorite, actually. I think there was one a little while back. I've liked the more recent ones, which have been kind of like more animation, more 3D model style. So like the one on the aroma of cut grass and things like that. But generally, I think it's a nice kind of additional way to communicate it, because of course you've got the graphics, which are quite a nice self-contained bit of information, but then the GIFs and the 3D model animations are a little bit more reach out and grab you, I guess, because there's no text. People engage with things which are moving around on their social feed, I guess, and yeah, so I think they're a really good complement to the graphics and the things that you produced.
Yeah, it's been fun. Actually, we had an intern this summer who did a lot of the 3D animations, and I do think the cut grass with the lawnmower going around and the cloud circling around it, I thought it was really fun. So we've had fun doing that, and we will continue to keep up with that. So I have a question. You sell your products on Redbubble. What's the best seller?
One of the best sellers is the fireworks one is up there. Flame colors
As a poster?
Yeah, as a poster, and the flame colors one as well. I think there's one, the one on which I did years ago, really close to the start of the site actually, which was talking about kind of, I think it was like a rough guide to spotting bad science. That one's really popular as well, interestingly. I'm guessing a lot of people putting it up to display in places. I'm not sure, but yeah, that one's an oddly popular one. And then, what else? Functional groups as well. Functional groups and amino acids, also very popular.
Well, that's very functional.
Exactly, yeah.
Literally
The functional ones tend to be very popular, as well as the ones which are, the eye-grabbing, colorful firework ones.
Right, right. So have you looked at your images over the years? Have they changed much, or have you kept sort of this branding throughout the years? And have you grown a little bit or changed design as you go?
A bit, yeah. So when I started off, I didn't have any graphic design experience whatsoever, really. I just kind of
None?
downloaded stuff. No, none. My background was entirely in chemistry. Prior to that, before I'd done chemistry at university, I did A levels in chemistry, physics, and English and maths. English being very definitely the odd one out there.
So you sort of hacked your way into this?
Essentially, yeah, I just kind of picked it up. And, if there was something which I couldn't work out how to do, I essentially just, tried to work out how to do it. If I couldn't, had a look around on the internet, tried to work out, well, that's the kind of thing I want to do. How do I accomplish that? And so basically trial and error. I think it probably shows a little bit on some of the earlier ones. If you go right the way back to, the beginning of the site, they do look a little bit rougher around the edges, that's for sure. So it's been developing. It has been developing over the course of the years that the site's been running, and I've even gone back to some of the older ones and tweaked the designs after, I've developed what I think is a slightly smoother looking style, and thought, well, actually, let's go back and make that one look a little bit nicer.
So what tools do you use? I have to ask, just from a graphic design, if somebody else wanted to try this, what tools are out there for somebody to design infographics like this?
The tools I use mainly Adobe products. So I use InDesign for piecing the graphics together, Illustrator slightly less, but for putting together icons and things if needed. I also use ChemDraw for the chemical structures and the graphics when needed. And in addition to that, I also use a few places. So there are a few kind of, for images for the graphics in terms of photos, there are quite a few public domain image sites. So I'll use those and try and find good isolated images, or occasionally maybe take a photo if I can't find a picture of the particular thing I need. And the other site, which is quite useful, that I use quite a bit, is called the Noun Project, which is a repository of just simple icons and things. And it's quite good because it's a subscription-based site for using the icons, but then it saves you a bit of time. If you just want an icon for a simple thing, rather than having to take the time to make it yourself, you can just go, right, okay, I want an icon of that. Brilliant, sorted.
Oh, that's nice. I actually have seen teachers, one of an assignment is to do an infographic on a chemist or a chemical structure. So taking your idea and then putting it into having students do that, I've seen that regularly. And I think it's really neat because the students then have to do your same process of how to communicate chemistry and then get it out to each other. And I love the kind of projects that add a different layer to teaching chemistry and teaching concepts like this. So I've seen that done. And next week we're going to be interviewing Alex Spokojny at UCLA, who actually takes it and has students do Wikipedia pages on different concepts in chemistry at higher level, college level chemistry, which I think is a nice segue for our next podcast next week. So I think in closing, what have you learned about chemistry? And then, since you have seen so many different aspects, this is a really interesting question. Where do you think chemistry can go to solve problems? Just as a person who have done lots of different topics in chemistry, where are some hot button issues?
Well, small questions.
I know.
Well, to start off with what I've learned, I guess, obviously I've learned graphic design through the course of doing it, which is nice. And I've learned, a whole host of different things about chemistry that I didn't know, because of course, through the course of learning chemistry, you learn the theories, and you don't necessarily learn all these contextual based things. And so I've learned a little bit about a lot, which is quite nice. In terms
Enough
of
to be dangerous is what I've heard it called.
exactly enough to have a useful offhand chemistry fact about most things to entertain people with.
Right.
Entertain / bore, depending on their disposition, I guess. In terms of what can chemistry do, I guess there's loads of stuff that chemistry's already done. It's delivered so many different advances in terms of supporting the world's population through fertilizers. You've got various different medicines which are produced by chemists. You've got various different things that we take for granted, like contraception pills and things like that, which chemistry has contributed to. So I think part of what I do is really kind of trying to communicate those things which chemistry has already done for us, and that maybe people don't realize the huge role that chemistry has played in that. In terms of where it's going, I think it's really interesting currently, because we've got a situation where chemistry's reputation perhaps isn't as bolstered as that of the other sciences. You've got the big faces of physics, you've got the connection that people just generally seem to feel with biology, and that connection really isn't there so much with chemistry, and people maybe don't really get what it is about chemistry that they can connect to on an everyday level. And so I guess that part of where chemistry, I hope chemistry can go to, is engaging more people with chemistry, and hopefully that will lead to continuing to develop things which will help people going forward. We saw the Nobel Prize this week was awarded to lithium-ion batteries. There's still so much more that can be done in the advancement of those kinds of batteries, or different types of batteries, which can then lead us to be able to use them for increased battery life, for one thing. That'd be nice, but also for new purposes, for powering electric vehicles and things like that. And that's something which is ongoing. So I think that hopefully that's where we're looking forward to. We can get more people engaged with chemistry and get them excited about those kind of advances.
Well, that's great to end on that. And as a visual communicator of chemistry and a CNE News contributor, it's wonderful to open up my CNE News every month, every week, and I don't know how many, but it's always fun to say, oh, I know Andy. So this has been a great conversation, and we look forward to seeing what you come up with next. So thanks a lot, Andy.
Thanks.
And it's been great talking to you.
Thanks.